Shabbat shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat shalom. Bim bam, bim 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 bam, bim 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 bam, yay da day da day day bim bam. Bim 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 bam, bim 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 bam. Shabbat shalom.
Good Shabbos.
Shabbat shalom. Good Shabbos, everyone. It's wonderful to be here together on this Friday evening on this Shabbat and to become a community. And as we always do, come on in that chat, introduce yourself, welcome others who are around you, who are gathering with us, who are a part of this community, who are connecting together and creating this community. It's a special Shabbat tonight, being in this time that we're following in the midst of the pandemic and month 11 now. And the blessing we have in our opportunity to not just give ourselves pause and to pray together, but to also bring other individuals into our community. And tonight, at the end of services, after our prayers, Dr. Larry Corey will be with us to share, who is the chief virologist and immunologist at Fred Hutch in Seattle, and is really spearheading the vaccination discoveries and awareness and their approvals in this country. So we'll be learning a lot together. He's a local Detroiter. I know many know of him, but we're really blessed to have him with us later on. But for now, it's time for our Shabbat, our time to be together, time to be a community. So let's begin Shabbat as the sun is set with the lighting of the Shabbos candles. If you have your own candles, hey, put them out. And you know what I love? When people send us pictures of them in services, lighting their Shabbat candles as Cantor's singing. Post that to our chats and to Facebook. So we're here together lighting our Shabbos candles. And we have the blessing of the sweetness of time together, of recognizing this moment as Shabbat as we join with Cantor in the blessing over the wine, the Kiddush.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Amen. L'chaim.
Chaim.
Comfort us in our wilderness. Comfort us as we struggle to take care of one another. Comfort us in our wilderness. Comfort us as we struggle with our world. Nachamu, Nachamu, Amin.
It is Shabbat. One day we have in the midst of our week, one day we have in the midst of our lives, in a sense. Take a little more time for ourselves, time to let the words the cantor just sang soak in a little more deeply. Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami Omar Elohechem. Comfort us, God. Comfort us. 2,600 or so years ago, those words were written. Prophet Isaiah spoke those words. Some say it was after the Babylonian exile as a way to remind our ancestors that there still could have hope. There still could be a sense of hope. That God was a presence in our lives to bring comfort. Preparing for tonight, we were thinking in the midst of the challenges that still swirl around our world, how do we find hope? We find hope in the healing. We find hope in our awareness. We find hope in the care we give to one another and our knowledge of protection and safety, even in the midst of the unknown. One of the rabbis, the mystics, taught that comfort comes from being okay with discomfort. Comfort comes from being okay with discomfort, realizing that we can't control everything, we don't know everything, but that we're, in a sense, in this together. Isaiah was teaching our people that in the midst of a world where the temple had been destroyed, where they'd been carried off from their homeland, from the land of Israel into Babylonian exile, somehow, some way we'd make it back. Somehow, some way we find meaning right there in that moment, in that day. There are times people have talked about pandemic as an exile. We're not allowed to do the things, we shouldn't do the things we normally would do. We can't embrace one another. We can't hug one another. We can't be in each other's homes, but we still can be connected. We still can find a sense of patience, even in this discomfort, even in the unknown. We can still find a way to hold on to hope, even in the most difficult of times. Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami Yomar Elohechem. And so now, as we prepared ourselves, as we've breathed in deeply, let us come together in our formal prayers in this Kaya service. If you'd like to stand, you may. If not, just sit back and relax and enjoy and sing with us as we come together with our call to worship with the Baruch Hu.
Teach us how to live, fill our hearts with joy and all the love you have Shelter us in peace as you lead us to your name, and we will know that you are one. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
I find something incredible about our tradition and the way that our prayers, as we read them, sometimes, even though they were written 1,000 or more years ago, that we still see them as and can read them as if they were written for us today, that they were written as if they were written this morning or a week ago or a month ago, because they relate to our lives and the way that we see our world. And this next prayer, every time I read it, I find something in it that speaks to me, that says, who wrote this, knowing what would be our lives 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 years from the time that it was written? The prayer is the words of the Hashkivenu. And in it, we start off by asking God to watch over us as we go to sleep tonight, to protect us, to protect our souls. With every breath in and with every breath out, that God gives us those wonderful qualities that make us unique. But in the middle of the prayer, we read the words, Ushmor tzeitenu uvoenu, l'chaim u'l'shalom. We're asking that God watch over us, protect us in our going out and in our coming home. That God provide us with life and with peace. L'chaim u'l'shalom. Life and peace. And so for a moment, I want you just to close your eyes and to meditate on those ideas. That God watches over us. God provides us with our life. Make sure that we're living with peace. Focus not only on those words, but your breathing for a moment. Breathe in, slowly inhaling through your nose and exhaling through your mouth. Keep focusing on that breath, something that we take for granted, that we just naturally do. By focusing on our breathing, by focusing on every breath in and every breath out, it calms our bodies and our minds. It allows us to meditate, to look within. L'chaim, to life. U'l'shalom, to peace. Picture in your mind what could be the perfect life filled with peace for you. What would a peaceful life look for you? What would it look like? How would it feel? How would it be different from what you experienced today? What you experienced this week? L'chaim u'l'shalom. Life and peace. We find ourselves these weeks, as we celebrated Groundhog's Day this week, living just like that movie, what every day feels like that Groundhog's Day. Feels like the same thing. It's the blessing of these moments of Shabbat, blessing of our ability to focus, to celebrate, to think about what creates these moments of peace in life. So we focus on that as we join with Cantor and sing these words of the Hashkivenu.
Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu l'shalom, v'hamidenu malkeinu l'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu l'shalom, v'hamidenu malkeinu l'chaim. Ufros aleinu Sukkot shlomecha, l'chaim u'shalom me'ata v'ad olam. Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu l'shalom,
And in preparation for the Amidah, we rise together and take a moment for our own private prayers, our own private meditations. Please pray silently.
The thought has blown the marketplace away. There is a song on the wind and joy in the trees. Shabbat has arrived in the world, scattering the song in the silence of the night, and eternity utters a day, and eternity utters a day. Has blown the marketplace away. There is a song on the wind and joy in the trees. Shabbat has arrived in the world, scattering the song in the silence of the night, and eternity eternity utters a day. Adonai sefatai tiftachu fi agid tehilatecha. Eternal God, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your glory. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Leah, ve'Elohei Rachel, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, ve'Koneh HaKol, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מחכה חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורה נאמן אתה להחיות הכל, ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
In the midst of our prayers, of course, our thoughts turn to those in need of healing and strength. And as we come together as a community, so do these prayers become that much more powerful. As we think of friends, family who are in our community, who we offer these prayers for this time, as well as all those in need. Say, Mishaberach Avatenu Abraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov v'Imotenu Sarav Kalei Avrachel Hu Yivarech et Cholim. Merciful God, who's blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Leah, and Rachel. Send your blessings to our loved ones who are stricken with illness and anxiety, especially as friends, family we think of at this time. Alyssa Yoto and Larry Burke, Grace, Geraldine Carafelli, Vanciel Campbell, Karen Kasman, Lindsay Cooper, Malai Kotant, Ezra Chaim and Devorah, Bethany Engel, Gary Fishman, Barb Flair, Sandy Flair, Karen Garassi, Ginny Marshall Gaspari, Kathy Gilman, Sandy Gorosh, Fatia Bapesha Panina, Susan Greenberg, Charles Gross, Sherry Gutter, Hank Heiser, Stuart Hike, Helen Indiana, Sarah Jacobson, Bruce Kay, Serafina Coffrin, Alyssa Coltono, Marta Lazar, Henry Leopold, Francisco Leva, Alan Lippett, Michael Malley, Zoe Marcus, Beth Margolin, Joyce Mazza, Perry Moss, Lori Moss, Scott Miles, Kate Negron, Rabbi Robert Nosenchuk, Rezo, Bat Leah Miriam, Marjorie Pensing, Melanie Pohl, James Raftery, Joanne Reed, Barbie Ryder, Jody Richmond, Alan Rosen, Mona Rosenbaum, the St. Amman family, Amy Salmanoff, Suzanne Zeleznik Smith, Barbara Storm, Chaim Shmuel Ben Noach, Kocha Ben Noach, Bill Vigilius, Malka Sarabat Yita, Helene Wolf, as well as those battling the coronavirus, both at home and in the hospital. The 53,117 American troops who were injured in Iraq and Afghanistan to date, and all the names in our hearts. Baruch Atah Narafal Cholim. Bless for you, God, give strength to those in need.
May the source of strength who bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say bless those in need of healing with Rafua Shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say
As we've been doing these past months, so we add this prayer for the healers in the midst of our service. Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu. May the one who blessed our ancestors bless all those who put themselves at risk to care for the sick. physicians and nurses and orderlies, technicians, home health aides, EMTs and pharmacists, hospital social workers, respiratory therapists, mental health professionals, psychologists, those who navigate unfolding dangers of the world each day, to tend to those who've sworn to help. Bless them in their coming home and bless them in their going out. Ease their fear and sustain them. Keep them in health that they may bring healing. Help them know again a time when they can breathe without fear, and bless the sacred work of their hands. May this plague pass from among us speedily and in our days. Amen.
Amen.
We turn to our prayers of Aleinu and conclusion as we rise together.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונן, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
O God, who heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds, give comfort to those who mourn. Give them courage and strength, compassion and kindness, and restore to them a sense of life's goodness. Give them the ability to accept the mystery of life and let them soon know peace. Help them endure that which no one can understand, and let us say, Amen. In this Shabbat, we think of those friends and family who have been taken from us in these most recent days, whose Shiva, Shloshim, and Shana we mark. Eleanor Zupke, Adele Kornfeld, Clara Selick, Annette Sack, David Blink, Anna Solitskaya, Henry Binder, Jonathan Raven, Robin Sindici, Stephen Dill, Diane Silverstein, Marcy Brontman, George Simmons, Larry Singer, Jesse Poland, Basha Bat Shmuel, Joanne Aronoff, Albert Resnick, Fanny Zuckerman, the 7,038 Americans in our armed forces who have been killed in Iraq, Afghanistan, and the surrounding areas to date, and the 456,461 Americans who have lost their lives to the coronavirus. And on the Shabbat, we also think of those whose yahrzeits we mark, those of whose anniversary of passing we lovingly commemorate. Max Basson, Margold Bing, Kara Lee Blumenthal, Lorraine Carson, Louis Cohen, Sylvia Cohen, Jean Cutler, Edward Elias, Sidney Ellis, Isabel Finstein, Rena Fishman, Jenny Freed, Mildred Garfinkel, Hedda Glick, Jeanette Gott Lewis, Molly Greenfield, Marjorie Ann Haley, Tammy Ruth Jones, Emmanuel Lazar, Martin Lenhoff, Maura Levine, Madeline Mandel, Arthur Melder, Leo Mertz, Michael Millman, Maury Nelson, Dr. Joseph Nosenchuk, Herman Sam Portney, Ray Randall, Martin Resnick, Joseph Saperstein, Harry Sittner, Emily Nicole Stillman, Joshua Turetsky, Myrna Joy Usden, Elizabeth Ann Volker, Lois Zamler Lesser, Helen Zeidman, along with all the names in our hearts and those who have no one say Kaddish for them, do we join together as one family, as one community, in the immortal words of the mourners' Kaddish, thanking God for the gift of their lives. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, be'alma divrach chirutei v'amlich malchutei, b'chayachon v'yomachon uv'chaye d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru, amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mivarach le'olam omei almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei d'krusha b'richu, la'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru, amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, Huya se shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn, comfort to all the bereaved among us here and everywhere. As together we say, amen.
Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Nachamu, Ami yomar Elohechem. Nachamu, nachamu, Ami yomar Elohechem. Comfort us in our wilderness. Comfort us as we struggle to take care of one another. Comfort us in our wilderness. Comfort us as we struggle with our world. Nachamu, nachamu, Ami yomar Elohechem. Nachamu, nachamu, Ani yomar Elohechem.
Good Shabbos, everyone.
Good Shabbos.
So we know that some of you came tonight to enjoy Shabbat prayers and services, and some of you came tonight because of our speaker, of Dr. Larry Corey in a moment. But whatever it is, it's a time to be together and to learn together, and that's the blessing we have. And so I'm honored now to introduce our guest who's joined us for this special service to teach us a little and share a little bit. And let me just tell you a moment about Dr. Corey, because for more than 4 decades, he has led some of the most significant advances in medicine, including the development of safe and effective antivirals for herpes, HIV, and hepatitis infections. As president and director of Fred Hutch from 2011 to 2014, he helped drive life-saving discoveries across an even broader spectrum of diseases. An international expert in design and testing of vaccines, he's helping to formulate a global strategic response to COVID-19. So in 2020, he responded to the sudden emergence of COVID-19 by redirecting his energies to speed the development of antiviral medications and vaccines against this virus. And so his work has been tremendous, obviously. You may have heard of him or of his partner, Dr. Fauci, who he has worked closely with over the years, and we're really honored to have him with us. But all of those impressive things, of course, to us at Temple Shir Shalom, he's just Julie Flashner's Uncle Larry, which may be the greatest honor of all. So it's a pleasure to introduce Dr. Larry Corey, who's joined us on this Shabbat to teach us a little bit about the experience of creating these vaccinations and how they've come to reality for us, and to let us understand a little more. And at the end, he's willing to take a few questions. So you can shoot those questions in the text of YouTube, and they'll be thrown to Rabbi and me, and we'll share those at the end together. So welcome, Dr. Corey.
Well, Rabbi, so great to be here, and you're absolutely, thank you for the kind words, but you're right, I am Uncle Larry, and in Detroit, I am Uncle Larry. So I like that role. Of course, my sisters will kibitz me more with a different tune, but than Uncle Larry. But anyway, it's a pleasure to be with you. So, how do you want to sort of
we thought it would be wonderful for you to share for a little bit, for 15 or whatever minutes you need. We defer to you to teach us a little bit, and then we'll have a little bit more of a conversation, and I'll share some questions that have come from the congregation at that time.
All right, now let me see if I can make technology work. I got a couple little visuals about how we started this sojourn, and a little bit about our RNA, because I have an organization that does a lot of education. So let me see if I'm going to be technologically challenged here. So the first part of this, we got here. I'm going to just sort of, I think I'm doing share screen. Can you see these?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, we'll get them up here. So when one starts this scientific endeavor, and this virus was first described in January and February, and when you saw what went on with Wuhan, we knew we were right away. I mean, I fly to DC and I eat dinner with Dr. Fauci with Tony, about once every 6 weeks, and I have done that for 10 years, and mainly that's around our programs in HIV. But starting in sort of January, we had dinner together, and we both, it was just before he started on the task force. And I'll just say that it was very clear from Wuhan that this virus unfortunately had legs, that it was really adapted to humans. It was really different than the other coronaviruses. And that sort of we needed to, the country needed to start a vaccine program, and that's what was needed. And the Vaccine Research Center that had been established for HIV vaccines 20 years ago, and had done pandemic preparedness for flu, and had done some stuff with SARS and the Middle Eastern coronavirus, immediately took that science, built on science, and started looking at, how do you make a vaccine? Well, it's conceptually pretty easy if you can do it, and really you make a vaccine by making an immune response to the landing gear. Because if a virus can't land, it can't get into the cell, and if it can't replicate or go anywhere, in some respects, if it can't land, it's not alive. So knowing where it lands and how to block landing is really the essential for attacking the agent. And we've been very lucky here with respect to, this hypothesis is totally correct. We have all the vaccines in the portfolio are really blocking this. I'm hoping you can see this. This is actually a better schematic of what let's say the coronavirus would look like, and that red crown on the outside of it is the corona of this, and that is, you all see this on television, and this is essentially how it lands on a cell. And attaches to a receptor on the cell. We have a name for it. It's called the AC2 receptor. And when it kisses like that, it lands. it lands in sort of an open position if your hands are open, and then when it lands on the receptor, it'll close. We had learned from sort of previous failures of vaccines that you needed to make antibodies in the open position, that was the best way to do that. And Barney Graham, who had worked on this at the VRC, designed it within sort of 8 hours of the genome sequence being posted by the Chinese, started working on how you make the genetic code of how you would design the receptor. We call it the prefusion protein that would land. The vaccine is sort of to make these antibodies. They're floating in. You can see they land on the spike protein. It's actually a good visualization because they land on different places on the spike protein, and that's what you want. You really want to have what we call a diffuse antibody response. We use the fancy word repertoire, and that would block the ability of the virus to attach to the cell. And that is really the basic conceptual framework of how one does develop the vaccine. I got one other visual I'm going to try, and screen sharing is stopped as share windows closed. Though we don't want that.
As you do that, I'll be like, you know, the ad lib to fill your time, so you have plenty of time to get that going. I neglected to mention Tara Gitlin, Julie's sister, your other niece, who's a part of Temple too, right? And how important all those relationships are. Of course, Julie Flashner works in our office at Temple, and she's the one who made that contact. So to all of your nieces, nephews, all the ones I don't know, of course, they're all proud of you too. So, but the ones that share Shalom.
What is an mRNA vaccine, and how does?
I hope you're seeing this. Are you seeing this now?
What is an mRNA vaccine? How does it work?
Okay. We're hearing it too.
Both Pfizer and Moderna are messenger RNA vaccines. They teach your body how to recognize the virus and fight back. What happens when you're infected with coronavirus? Viruses can't replicate on their own. To multiply, they attach to host cells and use them to make copies of themselves. The new coronavirus does this by attaching to a healthy cell using the spiky proteins on its surface. Once inside, the virus takes command of the cell's machinery and starts making copies of itself that can attack other cells in your body. To fight the infection, the body makes an immune response specific to the virus. These antibodies and fighter cells attach to the virus and allow the body to clear it out. What do the mRNA vaccines do? These vaccines get the virus's genetic information to your immune system before you are infected, so that if you do come in contact with the real virus, your body already knows how to fight back. How? The vaccine uses the genetic code for the spike protein on the surface of the virus. The vaccine carries it with a message that teaches the body to make the protein itself. It's like showing your body the recipe for making spike protein. When injected into healthy muscle cells, the mRNA instructs them to start making the spike protein. The immune system sees this spike protein and responds by making an immune response. The immune system will remember the spike protein, and, if it sees it in the future, it is ready to respond.
All right, well, that's the cartoon way of doing this. Let me see if I can get this off and get us back to something that's
It encloses tumor material.
That's all he needed here with new daily.
No, I'm sorry. No. How do I get out of this? There we go. Stop share. Okay, there we go. I hope that was, fumbling through the technology, but sort of loosening up the crowd a little bit about how this stuff works.
We do the same with technology on our end. It's always a
I was gonna say, that was so affirming to see a brilliant mind like yours having the same challenges that we do. And I feel sort of validated now. If I only could figure out who came up with the idea of let's go in the back door in a sense and work on the RNA part of, trying to combat that. I mean, the brilliance behind figuring this out is really remarkable. Was it the same kind of technology or, information that you were using with HIV vaccinations that was the RNA concept, or is this something unique?
Yeah, I would say 80% of the sort of backbone of what we've learned in SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19, and why all this happened is because of the investment we made in HIV. First of all, just the investment in the Vaccine Research Center, which started out with HIV. And you can say why we've been so less successful is because, well, we're now signing these variants, and we can talk about that in a minute, but the virus was relatively quiescent and it started to have variants about 11 or 12 months afterwards. The amount of variation that we see in this virus in 11 months is about what we see in about 11 hours in HIV. And so, HIV just is really a different animal with respect to the variation, and hence the ability to develop a vaccine on immune response. But all this sort of science and working on science is sort of the whole issue of isolating B cells and making monoclonal antibodies that you hear about. All that technology was developed around HIV. The vectors that you've heard about, the chimp addox that the AstraZeneca makes, or the Ad26 vaccine that you just got the successful stuff from Johnson & Johnson, as well as the structural parts of these protein vaccines with Novavax. We first tested those platforms, we call them platforms, in HIV. We tested them years ago and showed their safety, et cetera. And actually the Ad26 is still in clinical trials in HIV. So it is that sort of science building on science issue. And so it's sort of the failures of previous vaccinations that showed that you needed to take the spike protein and put it in an open position and keep it in the open position, because if you didn't do it that way, it would collapse even in the bottle, and led to a couple of vaccine failures. So all that investment has come from that. Like, then the reason we were able to do the clinical trials so quickly is we had to develop this clinical trials network in HIV in the United States and internationally. We had some of the world's best statisticians associated with the program who I've worked with, and when we founded, they're computational immunologists as well as biostatisticians, and we had laboratories that had learned how to do very sophisticated immune responses, so that when we put the vaccine in phase 1 and phase 2, we were able to know that we got immune responses that we thought would be better than natural immunity. And that's what we have. Actually, the RNA vaccines really give you higher antibody titers than natural immunity. And that's actually fortunate, because we're finding out that natural immunity is not protecting against some of these new variants that are coming out. So we really do need be above that. We are above that, and we're fairly certain that we'll have some protection, although we'll need to maybe modify some of these vaccines a little bit later. But so I think that's sort of the genesis of learned experience, some of it learned failure, to be able to muster the resources to do that.
Great. You started to mention variances, and I think for a lot of us that watch the news or are curious, we're starting to learn how those work. But can you explain how those come about in layman's terms for us, and what we can expect in the future?
Yeah. Well, our RNA viruses have by nature have more variation than DNA viruses. Maybe we teach biology wrong, because RNA really, the world started with RNA, which is sort of a catalytic, crazy substance. And DNA was created to create stability, because RNA was always changing. And so we expect almost all RNA viruses to change. We see that with influenza, and we now seeing it with this coronavirus. We certainly see it with HIV. There are very few of them that don't really change. And so what we've seen some variation in this virus, and we would expected that back in June, when we saw that there was a variant that arrived that quickly went through the United States that took over the variants that were circulating. And because it seemed to have a mutation in it, that why would a virus want to do this? Because it would attach to the receptor better, and therefore it would replicate better, and therefore you could transmit itself better. and that's why it would take over. But unfortunately, has happened with these new variants is we have the same thing happening. It ups the ability to attach better and replicate a little higher, and therefore they're sweeping through and happening and taking care of that, and essentially why the variants are having high transmission rates. Having said that, the UK variant that is in the UK and the European variant that we're starting to see here, not to be ignored, but it doesn't have, the vaccines actually handled that very, very well. Very little reduction in antibody or immune response needed to control that variant. And so that is sort of the natural evolution of the way viruses work. And the other kinds of mutations that occur in viruses is that when you make an immune response to that virus, what it will try and do is actually want to escape from that immune response. Now, it's a really great immune response. It's really hard to replicate. One of the problems that we have at the moment, to be honest, is we have such an uncontrolled epidemic in our country and an uncontrolled epidemic in many other areas of the country, that the more people you have who are replicating the virus, the more people you have who have immune responses to the virus, the more pressure under Darwinian selection that virus will want to mutate. And really the only sort of, and the best strategy that we have for this is actually to vaccinate as many people as we possibly can as soon as we can do that. Because if we can decrease the number of people who are infected, you sort of just decrease the number of viruses that are circulating that has the chance to actually replicate the high titers to change. So we'll get better change. Why we're seeing more change now is that we're seeing more people now who have ever had the virus. And that's why we're seeing more change now. It's very much a mathematical, use a fancy word, stochastic process.
Right. You know, there's a number of questions that are coming in on the YouTube feed, and we're going to share some of those within a moment. But I know that as I've talked to people, especially because the vaccines seem to have been developed very quickly, and you talked about why that was able to happen. One of the questions that I think some had was their concern about taking a vaccine that had been developed so quickly. How would you respond to somebody that had a question about that?
Well, I would respond to say we cut no corners. The studies that happened and why was it able to be so quickly? Because we actually took academia, industry, and government, and we actually took the risk out of it for industry by essentially the taxpayer paying for all this to happen. So I'll just say what we did do. In phase one, the studies that you do in any drug development or any vaccine development is you take the experimental vaccine, you give it to a couple hundred people, and you start with a low dose and you move to a high dose, and you start with younger, healthier people, and you move to older people. And the goal is to find what's the, not only safety, but what's the dose that gives you the best immune response that's the safest. And those studies were done, just like any other vaccine, a couple hundred, 200 people. And then we started, and those first studies defined sort of 2 doses. Then we took that to another like 500 to 700 people, in which you do a study to look at the safety as well as what's the optimal immune response. And that's, quote, phase 2. And both for Moderna and Pfizer, that went right away. Now, normally between phase 1 and phase 2, you analyze data, you make a decision, etc. So what happened here is the labs were ready. As soon as the sera came, the labs ran the stuff within a week. Rather than the company just looking at it, everybody looked at it, and including the regulators, and analyzed the data and looked at it and sort of said, this is what we think it is. The regulators, the FDA, was at the table, and rather than sitting on someone's desk for 3 weeks, it was on someone's desk for 4 hours. And you then collectively made a decision, and that you moved to phase 3. And during that time, I was assembling our army, the clinical trial sites that we initially started with 60, and then I started calling everybody in the country who was in infectious disease, who had an academic center, to sort of say, hey, we need your help. Everybody was taking care of COVID patients. I got no refusals. Everybody said yes. Therefore, we built these clinical trial sites. We went from 60 to 100. And at that same time, we were designing the studies, and we wanted a quick answer. And we made the studies very large, 30,000 persons per study. We actually knew that you could use 10 or 12,000, but I said double it so we get an answer quicker. We're in an epidemic, so we need to, do this as quickly as possible. So I would say that we went through all the stages, just like we normally do, frankly, with somewhat more numbers before we entered stage 3. And then we even did these very large studies in phase 3 for each of the vaccines. And it's almost sort of miraculous. The Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine have the same the strand of RNA that is making the spike protein is identical in the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine. So when you injected 2 independent trials done separately, one with by Pfizer itself with 40,000, one by the US government with Moderna and 30,000, and you got the exact same result. I mean, that's astonishing, actually. It was astonishing to me. You could take the same piece of RNA, put it in humans' muscle, and get the same immune response and result. That was sort of amazing. I don't think if you could have written a book, you would actually believed it, a year ago.
It's remarkable. Remarkable how far we've come when you think about this amount of time. What about the variants to the Johnson & Johnson vaccination that's about to potentially get approval? You probably know more than me if we're going to get approval on that and what day that will be. But it goes at it a different way in attacking the virus. And in the news, it says the percentage is less strong as far as its effectiveness, but it's still very strong.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of the same system as you saw in the cartoon. So what's in the RNA vaccine is a piece of strand of RNA that basically has soap bubbles around it, a lipid nanoparticle soap bubbles, and they go into the arm. The soap bubbles carries it in the cell, and the RNA is uncoated, and then you actually then make the spike protein in the muscle cells. Here, you're using a virus, an inactivated virus, and we call it a shuttle vector. You just like taking the space shuttle up to the space station, and it's the virus that enters the cell, the muscle cell, and then opens up, and there it is. The spike protein is there. Delivers the spike protein, and the virus is a disabled virus, so it doesn't replicate. The carrier, the shuttle virus, just sort of stops replicating, and then again the muscle cell is making the spike protein. The strand of RNA of that spike protein is almost identical. It's still prefusion. It has a couple little tweaks to it, and that's what is in the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Now that is 1 dose. Rather than 2 doses. At the moment, there's a study with 2 doses. I'm sure 2 doses will probably be better than 1 dose, but you sort of needed to give that dose 2 to 3 months. And we were in the middle of an epidemic, and we made a decision. Actually, Dr. Slawi really made the decision to say, hey, we want a 1 dose in the portfolio. And so it doesn't quite work as well in the mild symptoms, but the point is it has 85% protection against death and hospitalization and being on a ventilator. And it's the first vaccine that we have evidence that it actually works on the South Africa variant and the Brazilian variant. So yes, it is somewhat less effective in moderate disease than the RNA. But I would actually sort of say to myself, what's more important to me? Do I want a vaccine that's going to keep me from getting to the hospital, getting on a ventilator, and dying, versus and the trade I'm taking with that one at the moment is, yeah, I could have a couple days extra cough and a couple days extra headache and a couple days extra, sort of muscles than the RNA vaccine, but if that's available to me, I guess that's a deal I'd take.
So a number of questions that have come in that talk about once you've received the vaccine, one, can you still transmit the disease to the others who aren't vaccinated? Or if you're getting together, is it possible to safely get together with others who have received the vaccine as well?
Yeah.
And I'll add to that, maybe those who have had COVID already and have recovered from it.
Okay. The COVID, the COVID, if you've had COVID, I still recommend, and we are all recommending, get vaccinated. And the reason is that we're finding with natural immunity, the variants are still infecting, especially the South African variant is not, prior infection is not protecting against the South African variant. It probably does protect against some of the UK variants, but not the South African variant. So, and you may probably only need 1 dose of the vaccine, but if you can handle 2 doses, that's fine. So that's the easy part. The issue of transmissibility. The vaccines were designed to do studies in which we looked at personal benefit. So what we wanted to do was to make sure we had a vaccine that would prevent you from getting to the hospital and getting sick. And we designed the studies that way, and they were very successful. Asking the more complicated question of, does the vaccine block you totally from ever getting the infection in the first place? Is that the way it works? Or is it working in a way that you still can get infected, still replicate the virus in the nose, not replicate it in the lungs because you have this pre-existing immune response? But could it replicate in your nose enough so you could transmit it to someone else? And at this point in time, we actually have no data on that. Really no data. So we have to be a little bit conservative. It is the next study we're designing to sort of look at this and take the RNA vaccines and starting to look at whether it also prevents replicating in the nose and such a short titer that we won't transmit it. At this point in time, I sort of feel that if you are having a dinner party and everybody's vaccinated, well, that's probably okay. I'm not sure you need to have masks. But to me, there's still an issue of you invite someone to your house or you give a party or, someone graduates and they decide, or give an award and they decide to, bring Aunt Minnie, and you have no idea whether Aunt Minnie's been vaccinated or not, or whether she's susceptible or, at high risk. I view that that's more problematic. It's yourself are protected, but there's no assurity that you are not infectious to other people. So there's the mask here is you're protecting others. So if you're not worried about the others, then that's, that there is, I think, a lot of freedom, and there are a lot of situations in life, especially with family, that you can sort of feel that a mask may not be needed if everybody's vaccinated. But I do think when you go out in the public area and you don't know who you're in contact with, then I think there needs to be some personal responsibility to continue to wear a mask.
I think we probably both agree, or all of us agree, that a Jewish value is about worrying about others and taking care of others as well. Some of the texts that have been coming in as a shout out to Aunt Amy as well. And
Aunt Amy is right there.
Yeah, right. Knowing that she's there too. And your nephew Sam is saying hi to you, and he wants to know if the future of vaccines and virology, given the success of mRNA technology, if that's really what we're going to be seeing with more and more vaccines from your nephew, that is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we are. I think the technology of mRNA is really something that we're going to see in a lot of therapeutics. We're starting to see mRNAs to be able not only to make antibodies, and I think you can see it in other kinds of situations and other diseases. So I really think that this is just the beginning of this technology as it relates to human medicine.
So, well, one of the other values is to be respectful of people's time. And you jumped on, and we know that you were coming from other meetings, and that as we were talking with Aunt Julie, niece Julie, that she said that there are times that you are up at 5:45 so that you can be on shows on the East Coast as you're on the West Coast. And we greatly appreciate you sharing some time with us and your knowledge with us as well. And we want to let you have a little bit of Shabbat, hopefully, too, on the West Coast as that's about to begin for you. And so thank you so much for joining us, for sharing with us, for teaching with us, and for celebrating Shabbat with us. And
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you to Julie as well, who helped make this connection, and Taryn. We appreciate that, and that they're part of our community, too.
All right. Hello, Taryn. All right. And Robbie. Okay. Thank you, family. All right. It's nice to see everybody.
Thank you so much.
All right. Really, it's me who thank you, actually. It really is a pleasure to have been able to share some time. Thank you.
Well, we look forward to seeing you for the next family, God willing, family Simcha, when we're able to travel more and you're able to be with us in the sanctuary and celebrate with your families and have that joy as well. And thanks to your great work, God willing, that will be sooner rather than later too. So thank you again.
All right. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
And we conclude with our final blessing, of course, as Cantor reminds us of the power we have in ourselves, in our community, and our voices, as we ask God to bless us now.
Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha.
May God bless us. May God protect us.
Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yicholeka.
May God shine upon you, and may God shine through you.
Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasim lecha shalom.
May God always be a part of who we are, giving us all of our blessings, giving us wisdom and knowledge to learn from one another, most of all, blessing us with shalom, with peace.
V'yasim lecha shalom. Shabbat shalom, everyone.